This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution once again, and we are catching up with a gentleman I haven't seen for quite some time, my old colleague, Mr. Dan Donovan from Hooked Inc. How are you today, sir?
I'm well, Jamie. It's good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Now, let's cut to the chase here. How did the still ongoing pandemic impact things at Hooked?
Well, I think it impacted. It's a layered thing. Um, Obviously, I think it scared everyone on our staff in its initial days. I think everyone was quite concerned
Yeah,
about where that was headed. So to take it apart, operationally, being in a food business, um, a lot of the changes that other businesses may have dealt with were a little easier to handle. I think most people in the food business, obviously have a lot of sanitation and food safety protocols in place. So it wasn't a big stretch to make
right.
the additional changes that were required. And in fact, in the spirit of that, we had a critical look at every step that we were in our processes, and where we thought there was something we could do better, we literally just said that's something we should always do then.
Interesting.
Beyond the pandemic, if there was something that we could do better, then we should always be doing that. And that was sort of our approach on sort of the mechanics level. Um, at the business level, initially, customers were, we'll say, stayed away in droves. I think everyone just sort of, ducked down for the
Yeah.
first week or so. And then as people started to try to function in that environment, um, we shifted to being quite busy. And I think that was probably a result of some customers feeling that our shopping experience was more controllable or safer for them, and for that we're very grateful. Um, and then we kind of developed a home delivery business that fell out of that. And I say we developed it; we really didn't. Our customers developed it. We didn't. I don't think we fully appreciated just how many health professionals that we had among the ranks of our customers.
Oh, really?
And they were the first to reach out to us and say, you know, is there a way that you can help us, get some food deliveries, because, we're trying to limit our circulation in the grocery stores and that sort of thing. And so, that was easy enough for us to respond to. So we started to do that, and it sort of took on a life of its own, and it became really quite a large piece of our business, and continues to be a large piece of our business.
Now, is that something that you did internally with staff you already had, or was that something you contracted out with regards to the pickup and delivery of fish?
Yeah, so that's interesting. As you know, we about a year prior, we had wound down our restaurant supply
Yes, yeah, you told me about that.
operation. So that was pretty much completed in late fall. So really just a few months before this happened. So what we actually ended up doing is rehiring a lot of that staff.
Oh, wow, okay.
And we hadn't fully, gotten rid of all of our trucks. So we just sort of put that stuff back into motion, but repurposed it for home deliveries. And then we worked with a few of our former restaurant customers and restaurant friends, took some of their assets and some of their staff and put them to work and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a relatively easy thing to do because we'd been in the restaurant supply business. We already had a system for deliveries and packing and shipping. That wasn't something we had to reinvent. I would say over the sort of between the beginning of the pandemic and now, we've made a lots of fits and starts in how we want to deliver that. And I think we did what initially a lot of people did, which was try to rush to have an online business, which, I don't know, looks a whole lot like an Amazon website or
Yeah,
sort of generic click and shop, click and collect, or whatever they want to call it. And we kind of put the full brakes on that in the early summer, when we realized that that was taking us away from what our core strengths was
Yeah, it was about
as a retailer.
Yeah.
And so we kind of did a 180-degree turn, and we put our efforts into building a customer service team that could work by phone, by email, and we really tried to deliver that sort of same in-store experience as best we could using the new tools of technology.
So it's still a sort of
Exactly.
level of personal service, right? Which is what
Yeah.
makes you stand out from so many other places that you go and buy your fish. Now, you were telling me that the supermarkets kind of used the pandemic as an excuse, perhaps, to close all of their fresh fish counters as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone saw a lot of businesses make a lot of operational changes, purportedly under the
Yeah.
interests of food safety or public health. And so one of those things which we hadn't anticipated was that a lot of the grocers shut down their fresh fish counters.
Right.
The first we heard of that was on the West Coast, but it didn't take too long before it showed up here in Toronto as well.
Interesting.
Which I think opened up, a little bit of a customer base for us that we previously hadn't had.
I see. So if business increased, did you see any different kind of buying patterns emerge throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early days, again, the first 2 or 3 weeks, we would see what I guess, the media would call hoarding. So there was a lot of purchasing of frozen products. As you probably know, we don't sell a lot of frozen products. Most of what we sell is fresh. So we saw a real uptick in frozen product. And that was, anecdotally, that was what people were saying. They just wanted to know they had some product, in their freezer.
Yeah.
In the event that things went pear-shaped, more pear-shaped.
More pear-shaped. Yeah.
Shape. I don't know what the next shape is beyond pear. Pancake, perhaps. But I think that settled back into sort of a more normal buying pattern by sort of June, July.
And did you see any impact upon your supply chains?
We did. Actually, I'll say there's 3 levels to that I'll speak to. On the one, there's a whole list of product that literally just disappeared.
Really? What kind of things would that be? What?
So interestingly, things like oysters, where there's such a huge demand for oysters through the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
So once the restaurants began to shut down, those growers just literally packed up. They stopped. Yeah, they just stopped working. They laid off their staff pretty much, and they pretty much shut down their operations. Now, for a shellfish grower, that's a pretty easy thing to do. There's not a whole lot of cost involved. You leave the shellfish in the water, it continues to grow, and
you just end up with some rather big oysters when you.
Exactly. And we will see the impact of that over the next year or so for sure. A lot of the shellfish guys just literally shut down, and so that was interesting, because that made it really difficult for us to access product. So it took us, I don't know, say 2 or 3 weeks to kind of rejig some supply lines there and make that happen. And then number 2 was cargo. Air cargo became super, super difficult.
Because of the demand for it?
Well, actually, no, because once the planes started getting grounded, every passenger plane takes a certain amount of cargo and it's hold. And once those routes started getting shut down and the planes were grounded, there was just less air cargo bandwidth, if you will, available. And at the same time, both the provincial and federal governments were commandeering a certain amount of air cargo in order to prioritize PPE and medical. And so there's a real tightening in the available air cargo network. And so that took some work to kind of bounce that around. had to reroute a lot of flights. And then, just literally there's been schedule changes nonstop since this all began, as routes again get shut down or consolidated or redirected. So that's added a complexity to everything we do. Any one of those things were not insurmountable, but just a bit more complicated. And then the last item was literally a drop off in international demand, which was really fascinating to us because we tend to work in the higher end of the seafood market. Yep. So a lot of what we're buying for our customers is what's destined for, quote, white tablecloth restaurants around the world, the Michelins and the Michelin 3 stars, et cetera, which just literally overnight disappeared. That market disappeared. And so that left a lot of, whether they were wild fishers who normally access those markets and had no market all of a sudden, and they didn't know what to do, or growers. I'm thinking of some of the salmon farmers that pay, that really do a carriage trade job of growing their product because it's destined for those markets, and they literally had no markets. So we saw some massive price increases in some cases, and then we just saw some pretty serious price drops as well, as people tried to work their way into the common market.
Because of the market surplus, because there was no place.
Yeah, there was some, exactly. Yeah. So it was particularly in the wild salmon in the early part of the spring. The wild salmon market was kind of all over the map. We saw, obviously, we've seen big currency changes between U.S. dollar and Canadian dollar. So some of that was offset by lower pricing in the market. I think overall things remained pretty much within bandwidth. There was a few small price increases that we had to push on, but for the most part, it stayed pretty predictable. So I think that the increased supply offset the higher exchange rate for us.
So what would you say the overall impact was on fisher folk and the fishing industry as a whole?
Well, to be fair, I think that they've had a rough year because they've had to rethink. I mean, everybody's had to rethink their business, so they're not unlike everybody else. They had to rethink their business in terms of where they were moving their product. In some cases, where there was a large food service component to their business model, they really suffered. They had nowhere to move their product to, and so for the most part, they just didn't fish, and so a lot of capture capacity just disappeared out of the market. Wow. The difficulty with that from our perspective within the supply chain is that that's not a coordinated effort. And so, if all of the independent fishermen in one sector decide it's not worthwhile to go fishing, then all of a sudden there's no product out there. So it was a bit of a fits and starts thing, because then once that happens, then a few people realize, well, there's a small market out there, and so a few people go back into it, and eventually it worked its way out. Yeah. But yeah, the supply side's been a bigger disruption probably for us than the retail side.
Interesting. Now, we know each other from the restaurant world back in the day. And, having been a restaurateur yourself, what are your thoughts about the future for particularly the independent restaurateur in Canada at this moment in time?
Well, I think we both have an enormous affinity for our friends in the business. And I grieve for a lot of people who are going through a lot of stress right now. Yeah. At the same time, the restaurateurs that I've worked with and had the pleasure of working with in my life are just such energetic and creative people. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely stunned by how people have reworked their business models and come up with new and exciting things, which I think will endure, post-COVID, if you will. So I think that we're in for a new landscape in the restaurant business. I think I'm an optimist, so I think it will return, but it will look different for sure. I think that there'll be different models out there than there was before. I think there'll be different players.
Yeah.
I think there's some new strong people will emerge from it, and probably some new people enter the market as well with some new ideas.
Well, I remember, thinking back anecdotally, fall and winter were normally our busiest times of the year, but with the kind of restrictions that are being placed upon seating of people and the like, and we've had this kind of extended patio season that's been augmented with heat lamps and the like. I think this winter is going to be a tough one for the restaurant industry.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that the people who will do well out of this are the people who have altered their business models and found new ways to operate.
Right.
And I think that the people who are waiting for this to end are in for a really rough winter.
Right.
Yeah, the people who've chosen to just wait it out, it's going to be a long wait, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you there. How satisfied have you been with the way that our government, whether that be municipal, provincial, or federal, have reacted to this pandemic and mitigated and or managed it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, it's a multi-part thing. So I think I was actually pretty impressed with how quickly the federal government responded.
Mm-hmm.
I think from our perspective, and I can only speak from there, I think the programs have been pretty advantageous. They haven't really done anything for us because our business actually grew through this, not massively, but enough that we didn't qualify. I'm a little concerned with how the commercial rents have been handled, because I know that for a lot of our restaurant friends that's probably their number one sticking problem, and that's a difficult one because obviously the commercial landlords need some sort of protection as well. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to be solved, but I think that's probably, if there's one criticism, I think that's the area for criticism. But I don't say that having a solution in my pocket either.
Right.
It's a thorny issue. So.
Yeah. Well, I always like to end these interviews on a bit of a silver lining. What would you say the most positive thing has been that you have observed or learned throughout the ongoing pandemic?
So I think there's two things that I've observed, and that is that I'm really heartened by how well Canadians have stepped up to take care of each other.
Yeah.
I think that there's a generosity and spirit in our country that has been really made me happy. It's been wonderful to see that. And I think that a lot of businesses are just going to operate better coming out of this. I think anyone who's come through this has learned a lot about their operation, and will be in a better and stronger position coming out of it. Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it. Dan Donovan, it's very nice to see you again, and always great to hear some pearls of wisdom from you. Hopefully we can catch up much more often because it's been way too long. But you take care of yourself, and thank you for joining us at Good Food Revolution.
Thanks, Jamie. Take care.